First, before we dive into any more, let's talk about BetOnline, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything online sports betting. Right now, you can receive a 50% free bet of up to $250 on your first deposit to bet on anything from UFC to baseball to Formula One racing. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, you can go to the online casino, get in on a game of blackjack or poker or one of the over 150 slots games. Head over to the website today to get in on the action. Use promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. Bet online, the game starts here. All right, let's move into top 5 wide receivers in the SEC. It's going to be fun. And, when we think of other positions that we've ranked, it's just each team has, one or two guys in that position. Well, no, it's much different with wide receivers because there is a number of wide receivers on every team, and there's a number of good wide receivers in the SEC. So I'm interested to see our list here. We will rank 5 to 1. Chris, I'll let you go first. Who do you have as your number 5 wide receiver in the SEC?
Okay, I usually lean over past performance when in doubt over future, but I made a little bit of an exception in this case. And I think it was Greg McElroy talking this guy up as a potential Heisman candidate. It's Dillon Bell at Georgia. Now I know that they
Okay.
split their targets around, but I also know they lost McConkey and Brock Bowers, and Dillon Bell was a guy last year against Florida State in the Orange Bowl that really lit it on fire in the first half of that game before it got to be a blowout. If I'm hearing Greg McElroy talk about this guy as a Heisman contender, if he's got maybe the leading Heisman contender throwing in the ball, and there's fewer established mouths to feed, I think Dillon Bell's got a shot to be in the top 5. Hasn't done it yet, so I hedge my bets a little bit, but that's where I started.
Yeah, and I think that's a good place to start. I went and I had trouble with this, putting these in a good order. I feel like this guy could be farther ahead. I have him at 5 though, and that's Oklahoma's Deion Burks. He transferred from Purdue. Um, let's see, he was Purdue's top receiver, 47 catches, 629 yards, 7 touchdowns last year. I think, and that's one of those things. It's hard to predict the future. You're going to a new place. You're playing against the new teams in the SEC at Oklahoma, but I still think he's going to be a dynamic receiver. He has Jackson Arnold throwing him a football. So I went Deion Burks, number 5.
I went Deion Burks as my number 4. I feel
Okay.
like Purdue's offense wasn't, setting world records a year ago. He was their leader. He's walking into a much better offense. Now, there is going to be some uncertainty early with Jackson Arnold, new quarterback, and so much turnover on that offensive line. But I feel like that's an offense where somebody's going to be a pick to click. And I also had him in my top 5 for those reasons.
Yeah, for sure. So I went Isaiah Bond of Texas,
Mm.
number 4. He's the Alabama transfer. He was one of the top receivers at Alabama in 2023. Obviously, he made some tremendous catches, including the one in the back of the end zone in the Iron Bowl. But he steps into Texas where there are other wide receivers. But I feel like the quickness, like the speed burst from Isaiah Bond, from what I saw from him at Alabama, is going to work so well with Quinn Ewers. And I think he will be one of the top targets there at Texas. So I went with him, number 4.
Yeah, on my list, but not in my top 5.
Okay.
In
So
a
who do
in
you
a
have?
very tough top 5, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. So who would you have number 3?
I had Kyren Lacy for LSU at 3. And
Okay.
he's getting a lot of WR1 hype out of camp. They lost 2 first rounders. I know they also lost their Heisman candidate at quarterback, but he, to me, looks like a clear-cut choice to lead them in receiving. They do have a decent tight end room too, as I think most people know. But I feel like Kyren Lacy at LSU, if you believe the hype and you believe in that offense and what it has produced the last couple years, feels like somebody in that room is going to be a big producer, and he's the guy who stands to benefit as we do this a week and a half out from the season.
Yeah, I think that's a really good pick. He would have been in the top 10 in my list for sure. Didn't make the top 5. Number 3, I went with Jordan Watkins of Ole Miss.
Okay.
He's in his 3rd season. He had a good career at Louisville there, and now is in Oxford. And I don't. I feel like and Ole Miss has got a slew of receivers. Several could be on a list like this, but I feel like he is really good. He's going to be one of the better ones in the conference this year. But yeah, I really like him. And again, with a third-year starting quarterback in Jackson Dart, I think Jordan Watkins will be fun to watch this year.
Yeah, the minute you said that, my first thought was I probably should have given that more consideration because he was not in my top 5 and really not on that second list. And I think the way I thought through it a little bit is like if we're trying to project receiving leaders at the end of the year, what might it look like? And I don't know that that's fair because you can be a lesser player on a lesser team and by virtue of not having competition, move up the leaderboard. Jordan Watkins has got the opposite problem. They've got 3 standout wideouts plus an ace tight end in Caden Prescorn. We keep talking about
Yeah.
tight ends today. I think that we've
Yeah.
maybe slept on that as a storyline in this league. But yeah, I think that's a perfectly defensible pick and maybe one that I should have had in mind too.
All right. So who do you have in number 2?
I don't know about you, but I feel like the top 2 were pretty clear cut. I would be shocked if our top 2 were not the same. I went with Tre Harris at Ole Miss. He is the standout guy on the league's best wide receiving room, and to me that was an easy one.
Oh yeah. I mean, you last year averaged 18 plus yards. I mean, that's dynamic, and he is. Yeah, I talk about Watkins and they got Juice Wells as well. Tre Harris is going to be their go-to guy. Their first pick when the ball's in the air is going to be Tre Harris. He is dynamic, and to me, set up to have a really good year this year. But yeah, no surprise, Tre Harris 2, and I imagine Luther Burden is number 1 on your list from Missouri.
Yeah, I was gonna say, who do we have in the Luther Burden spot? That was we've had a lot of tough assignments, but I think, and I mean, it really you could have debated he and Harris, certainly,
Yeah.
but to me, I think most people, if you say best receiver in the country, I think a lot of people would go with Luther Burden. So that to me was not something I spent any time debating.
Yeah, I mean, you look at a lot of the preseason magazine, a lot of the preseason talk, and I mean, he's second, third top wide receiver in the country. I mean, and the way this year is setting up for him, he's got Brady Cook back at quarterback, the guy who's thrown the ball to him every time. Yeah, it's set up for Luther Burden to have another really good year, and I think he's going to be part of any major success that Missouri is able to have is because you've got a dynamic receiver in Luther Burden.
All right, Chase. Now that we've finished our list, tell me where you were having troubles putting this together.
Yeah, so I feel like again, there's so many good receivers. I feel like you could put all 3 of Ole Miss's big time receivers on this list. Um, I wanted to consider LSU into mine. I didn't
Yeah.
have any LSU players, but I know they have good receivers. To me, it's just there's so many guys, and like you said, you don't want to predict the future in this. Um, but you kind of want to like these
Yeah.
guys are primed to have good years. But yeah, this was tough. This is probably one of the toughest rankings that to me that we've done is trying to put 5 guys down when there could be 10 to 15.
Well, I think you always lean on history and what's proven because there's
Yeah,
always a lot of guys that are hyped that don't produce. But if we're just gonna do that, then we should have just given you the all right, here's the top 5 receiving leaders from a year ago who are back and left it at that. But that's no fun.
yeah,
To me, I had a hard time with a lot of stuff. And I think more it was the guys that we left out. You mentioned Isaiah Bond. I left him out. Very defensible pick. To be honest with you, Chase, I don't know that there's much difference between 3 and if we wanted to go all the way out to 10 or 12. I think it
yeah,
could end up being that kind of year. I can't believe I didn't either have Dane Key or Barion Brown on here. I
yeah,
thought about that hard. I thought about doing a cop out and just making them like a tie for 5th. And I just couldn't like Key is the guy that per catch has been more productive. But Brown is a guy that they use in returns, which usually
yeah.
signifies the most explosive player. So I couldn't make up my mind with those 2 guys. And so I just
Eugene Wilson as well, Florida.
he was the other guy on my list. And here, you know what? You know what team never came up in this discussion? Tennessee,
Yeah.
which had the
Wow.
Biletnikoff winner 2 years ago. I mean, Squirrel White could have been on this list. Chris Brazzell from Tulane. If you want to project, maybe Mike Matthews. That seems like a lot to bite off for a freshman. Nic Anderson at Oklahoma, another name that we didn't put on
Yeah.
here. Theo Weiss could have been on here potentially. I mean, I just feel like I would tell people don't get too hung up on the rankings. And I don't know that there's much difference between this and I mean, Moose Muhammad, that's another
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
I mean, they just keep coming.
They sure do. And again, that's why I think it's going to be such a fun year in SEC football because there's so much talent on the field. But yeah, it was hard. It was hard to nail down our top 5 there. But those are our top 5 wide receivers in the SEC as we get ready for the 2024 season.